My first story is all about how brands are making their own anime. Japanese animation is so popular amongst younger generations. Brands realize this and they're
Mhm.
starting to make their own versions of it. So this week in the news, I saw that not only Duolingo, but also Gap moved forward with their own animes and released them. So did you see these?
I didn't see Gab, but I saw Duolingo, and actually that is spoiler alert, but my hit for this week, and I can deep dive into it a little bit more. But
Oh,
this
damn.
is
Well, I'll try to leave some space for you. But essentially, what Duolingo did is they came out with an anime miniseries, 5 60-second episodes, and I think it's because the CMO had mentioned that they came out with some anime focused social posts, and those posts got so much
yes,
engagement that they decided to lean into it, and they're like, well, let's just make our own anime. And what's really cool is that the show is all in Japanese. And it's got subtitles with like almost every other language. And the story is all about like expanding the lore of Duo the owl and his
yes,
friends,
yeah,
which
yeah,
is
yeah.
like this insane owl character. If you're not like tracking all the content that Duolingo makes, it's pretty fantastic how he's a bizarre, larger than life owl.
Yes, and I think Duolingo has always been one of these brands that I think is a reference when you're thinking about, like, cultural relevancy with Gen Z and even now Gen A. They were one of the first ones to be on Roblox. They also like, their social media is, like, one of the few brands that I love actually look like, generally engaging with their Instagram because it's just generally, like, really funny, and they just know what is culturally relevant, and they're very fast
And they
at
take risks, it's
they
like they
take
have some
risks. They're
edgy type
very
of immersive, interactive,
yes.
and leading, social, content, which is, like, pretty impressive.
Yes, and they just know what is part of, like, conversation, so, they're just very quick at turning around content, so it doesn't surprise me that they're doing I think what's interesting is that they're doing a long form, like, an anime is probably like, I don't know how long the episodes are going to be, but that
Well,
is something.
they're only a minute long each, and
Okay.
there's 5 of them, but it's like a little series, you know? And what's cool is they partnered with Titmouse, the animation studio, and they're the same company that did Big Mouth. So it's like real pro animators behind this. So one thing I really love about this is how this anime is actually not only is going to be worked into the Duolingo app, but it's also going to be on the brand's YouTube channel. So it's sort of like spreading it across all the different touch points. And I think one of the reasons why this really works is that one of the reasons why fans and people want to learn Japanese is because they watch animes.
Yeah.
So, as Duolingo, as a language company, it makes so much sense. A language learning company, it makes so much sense to like do this sort of direction.
Yeah, no, it makes sense, total sense. Love it,
And
love to see it.
yeah, and then the other big one that came out this week was Gap. They made their own animated film, anime style, and this was to promote the new limited edition Gap and Sandy Lang collection. And basically, it's Sandy Lang's like personal experience growing up in New York, and it's all about her magical closet and sort of her ideas about fashion. And it's just such a cool kind of vibe because it's really leaning into nostalgia of that old school anime look. It's very lo-fi, no Gen AI was used, and it's just a way to like connect with younger audiences and also older audiences that like understand that anime, that look and that vibe.
Mhm.
And I think this is kind of surprising for Gap because, traditionally they've done so much, choreographed dance, in their marketing, and same with like celebrity ambassadors. It's kind of what they've done for like a long time. This is the first time that they've done like an animated, like anime style film.
But I feel like they're back again. They're like their
Gap
recent
is
campaign,
back.
Gap is back, which is really exciting because I love the brand, but for a really long time I felt like they were just a bit out of touch, I think, with what was culturally relevant. And I think their latest campaign, we talked about it, I think, in one of our last like hit miss. But they're just on a good track right now to understand like what do they consumer or like younger generation, what kind of content they like to do. So I haven't seen it. I'm really excited to actually like, is it out yet? The Gap.
It's out. It
Okay.
looks really cool. You should check it out. Both of them. The anime styles are on point. Like if
Okay.
you're not paying attention, they look like straight up like authentic Japanese animated
That's cool.
content. but it's created by these brands. So great work to both of them. What do you got on your next story?
So next one is a small piece, but wanted to highlight it because we talked about Netflix last week, how they are now, reinvesting into, well, what we guess is reinvesting into creating their own game when they fired and remove all of the branch that was essentially their gaming studio where they were going to create their own game. It sounds like this is now back. And this week, they also, like early last week, sorry, they also released a new party mode game. What that essentially allows you to do is we're not at a point where you can play with other people and like that are outside of your household. What that allows you to do is essentially play some of the games that they have on your TV, and your phone is the controller, and you can play with family members, friends that are also like sitting next to you. So they are leaning a little bit more like, I think they're leaning into like the no social elements. It would just made me question what was the intent here and whether they're more looking at taking market share from like the Xbox, the PlayStation, where maybe tomorrow people are gonna discover like bigger games, and maybe they'll do like, I don't know, a big partnership with Steam that allows them to have more games onto their platform that people can then, it's part of like a package, a bit like what Xbox is doing. They give a bit of mixed signals around what was the future of gaming on their platform, and it sounds like they're doubling down. In the most two weeks, we've seen a lot happening on their side. So we'll keep a close eye on Netflix and what does that mean as well for brands in the future. For now, it's still early days on the opportunities, but really interested to see.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was really interesting, and I'm excited to see it. I think it's really positioning Netflix as an entertainment platform and not just a
Pleasure.
video streaming service. The question is like, do you think the Netflix audience is going to want to play games? Because right now they're going to Netflix to watch all their series. So
Yeah,
that's like a behavioral shift. So I'm
I
really curious to see if it gets picked up and what the usage looks like.
Yeah, I agree. I think it has to do with the games. It's because you have like Netflix Kids, and I just wonder if maybe that's the approach that they have to take. Is like, what are the kind of games that we can already like young users? They don't know us for like. I feel like you and I know the history of Netflix, and we have a certain way of engaging with it, so it might be hard to convince us. But it's more like that younger generation that just like starting to engage through their parents' account, and
That's a
then
good point.
getting them used to actually, they might do a partnership with Bluey, who knows? And I think we'll talk about it with James on like the how those broadcasters are going to think about IP licensing, and maybe they'll be able at some point to have like a really kid focused IP that has a series of its own, but then you can only access the game, and it's a simple game that a young audience can play with initially, because like they're not at a stage where they're not right now going to compete with Xbox or PlayStation. Like the games that you have on Netflix are very simple, very low lift. Like the gameplay is like the control is not to the level that you would expect of like a proper console game or a PC game. So it's very low lift mobile games, but it might change in the future.
Yeah, I mean, let's see how people pick it up. I mean, I do think it's interesting. Like, what about those younger users that are discovering Netflix for the first time as a place to play games, and then it expands their understanding to be like, oh, now I can watch stuff here too.
Yeah, 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 exactly.
So
It's a whole
maybe
platform.
that's an area where growth can come from.
Yeah, 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 for sure. What do you have next?
For my next story, it's all about how the Meta Ray-Bans are becoming Disney tour guides. So Disney Imagineers are testing early prototypes of virtual assistants at Disneyland using Meta Ray-Bans smart glasses. And essentially, this is leveraging Meta's SDK. So we talked about it a little bit earlier on the show, but different developers are going to be able to create their own apps and roll them out via the glasses. So the Disney team is doing this, and essentially this is like guided tours for fans and people who are at the parks to get a better and more enhanced experience while they're there. And I just wanted to play this clip from the video so we can kind of get some use cases. And I wanted to get your point of view on this, Alban. But let's play that clip.
What's that? How can I ride it?
That's the Mark Twain Riverboat, a classic Disneyland paddle boat. It's nearby and you can board for a relaxing 14-minute cruise.
Where can I get a gluten-free snack?
Tropical Imports, right by you in Frontierland, has fresh fruit, Cuties mandarins, and other gluten-free snacks. Want to check the menu?
Where can I get one of those?
You can get that Porg keychain nearby at the creature stall here in Galaxy's Edge.
What's this ride? And is it appropriate for my 4-year-old?
This is Finding Nemo's Submarine Voyage. It's gentle, family-friendly, and perfect for young kids, including your 4-year-old. Hey, Beta, Pirates of the Caribbean currently has a short wait time. Want directions?
Yeah, that sounds great. How do I get there?
Once you get to New Orleans Square, Pirates of the Caribbean will be just ahead on your right.
Okay.
Hey, Beta, Winnie the Pooh is nearby. Would you like to meet him?
Yeah. Can you tell me how to get there?
So, Alban, were you familiar with this rollout, and what are your thoughts?
It's all fresh reaction. You know, when you first mentioned the story, I was like, why would you need a tour guide of Disney? You know, like I have like this memory of like the map, and like, you know, it was like such a beautiful like piece and part of like the experience. But seeing the use case, I just find incredible. I find it so interesting, and how, you know, like obviously like I can only imagine like the amount of information and processes to be able to like, you know, see the keychain and know that you can buy it at this shop. Like this is a level of data I can't even process. Like how, like what was the like the process to be able to train an AI on like knowing where to go and what to do. But I can only imagine like what would that look like if you start doing a partnership with a museum or with just a whole city. This is really cool. Like a very interesting use case that I think is going to give a lot of idea to different businesses.
Yeah. And I think that, like Disney is so big that they're going to be able to be a first mover here. And to your point, I think a lot of businesses are going to leverage this. I think Disney and these larger companies will be those first big use cases. And I think one thing I love about this conceptually is like it's enhancing the user experience for when they're there. And right now we're getting an audio layer that's supporting our experience. I'm really looking forward to getting like a visual layer. Can you imagine like what they could do with all the Disney IP and all of like the geolocators and the different interactivity you could do with IP, and kind of making the lore and the park come to life in ways that it like can't currently. And that
Yeah.
to me is very exciting.
No, I agree. And I wonder if there's going to be like a sharing of information, because I think there's a few pain points that you have when you're at Disney, which is like, you know, when does the parade start? So like just planning your day can be a little bit, you know, if you have kids, I can imagine that it can be quite overwhelming if you want to make sure that they see everything and you don't miss out on everything. So I just can imagine that they like plan your day, you tell them what you want, and they can tell you where to navigate in the park so that you don't, you know, it becomes an experience that's a little bit more smooth.
I
And
think this
also
is going to be successful technology because this is something that people actually want, and
yes,
it's additive to their lives. This is
yeah, I agree.
not like this, shiny object that people want to like talk about for 5 minutes and then put in their pocket.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
people will be using this stuff. So it's
Yeah,
cool.
I'm excited. Just for that, I just really want to get the glasses. I was really excited to see like what are the new ways that we'll be able to engage with like real world, which I think every tech that we've seen recently has always been like through your phone, through like VR, etc. And I think what Meta is doing is what Mark Zuckerberg was saying is like we really want people to be able to experience just more real life experiences, but a little bit enhanced with these glasses. So a great use case that I hadn't seen. So really excited. Thank you for sharing that story.
100. What's next?
Last one. So it's on the back of we mentioned that we had a bit of FOMO last week, not to be at ADWEEK in New York, but I did look a little bit at like what were the top panels discussions, and one that kept being brought up is one with CMO of Hilton, Bose, H&R Block, and EOS products, where they were talking a little bit about the mistakes that brands are making when they are trying to engage with Gen Z. And one thing that came up quite a lot is debunking the myth around Gen Z's not. I think when you think about Gen Z, there's a lot of articles that are saying, oh, they hate advertising, they're like really anti-advertising, and they're not brand loyal. And these brands, and not something that I would agree actually. And I think these brands actually debunk those myths where they were saying actually we've seen movement of them being really loyal to brands. They are engaging with a lot of branded content. It's just different kind of content that we might be used to. And one of the quote that I wanted to highlight for this particular story was the CMO of Bose saying that at the moment it really reshifted the way that traditionally you had a TV campaign and then you had content that was just I guess, to amplify this main campaign that usually would be brought on TV and at home, etc. They completely shifted that, where they're now thinking a lot less about advertising, and 90% of their budget now and effort is going towards just content, whether that is social, whether that is entertaining, or something that's going to be actually on virtual environment. That really shifted the way that they are thinking about their marketing calendar, to say, where it's no longer led by big pillar TV campaigns, and actually more, because we know that audiences are fragmented and on many different platforms consuming different kind of media of content. They are thinking more now on like sub communities and small communities, and creating more content than actually this one campaign. And it goes back to a little bit of what we were talking about, where we're going to see more and more brands, especially with AI, creating content that are a lot more tailored to like really niche communities, but at least that is customized, tailored to that specific audience that you're trying to speak to, as opposed to another note that was discussed on this panel, where it's now incredibly hard for brands to do a global campaign where you can have this global reach, because not one person is on the same platform than we used to have before. So now like the game has shifted a little bit, and I just love that. And it was more about Gen Zs are not anti brands or anti like brand loyalty. They just want to consume a different kind of content that has to make sense to the platform that they're consuming into.
Yeah, 100. I was really glad to see that panel, because it kind of validates our entire podcast, which is, immersive marketing. And I feel like so many marketing teams, so many brands are taking a different perspective. Like the old school perspective was, let's make our big commercials and let's just get them out. And now it's really about like creating conversations. And it's also about creating entertainment. It's like taking campaigns and like permeating them and making them and those ideas relevant to everybody's lives and additive. So we're seeing so much more of it, and I love it.
Yeah, I'm excited, and I think it can feel a little bit daunting, because you're like, oh my god, I have to create so many different variation of content for all of these platforms. But again, that's part of like that's why it was intertwined to like AI, and how that could be utilized to it, is like how you can leverage AI as a way to be able to translate some of those pieces of content to the platform that it is relevant to. So I would recommend, if you haven't seen the replay, it was a really great panel, so would recommend it. But on to real-time review. What did you get up to? I think like you have actually a real life experience for us
Yeah,
this
well,
week.
speaking of like taking brands and marketing and like making it immersive, I have some firsthand experience, because I went to the Gabby Dollhouse experience at camp. So let's go to that real-time review.
That is it for this week's news highlight. If you're watching on YouTube, don't miss the full episode featuring our real-time review of Gabby's Dollhouse and an interview with James Reevell, expert of new media and gaming and ex-executive editor for youth audiences at the BBC. We'll see you there.
The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views, policies, or positions of host employer. The information shared during this podcast is based on personal experience and publicly available information and is intended for informational purposes only. Any references to specific platforms, companies, or partnerships are made in a personal capacity and do not imply endorsement, partnership, or official association with any organization mentioned.